Last week we talked about energy, about a world that suddenly realized it couldn't depend on the Middle East anymore, and about Taiwan making the chips that power the future while someone else controls the fuel that runs it. This week we continue with that conversation in some shape or form because something interesting happened while the war was grinding on and the oil price was still hovering above $100 a barrel. Taiwan broke a record. Actually, that's really not news these days. It broke a record and then it broke another, and then yet another one. Export orders, industrial production, semiconductor output, all-time highs, all in the same week. Taiwan continues to have the best moment in its modern economic history. And yet, ask a Taiwanese household how they're feeling about the economy right now, and you'll get a completely different answer. Both of these things are true at the same time, and understanding why tells you something important, not just about the Taiwan, but about who wins and who loses when inflation becomes the permanent condition of the world. Nobody is connecting those dots, and today we are going to. Hi, you're listening to Beyond the Reefs, a show produced by Radio Taiwan International. Here we talk about socioeconomic issues that are faced by Taiwan and their broader impact around the world beyond the reefs of this island nation. Before we get to the bulk of the show, let's quickly recap what happened in Taiwan this past week.
Taiwan-based think tank Zhonghua Institution for Economic Research predicts the country will see economic growth of more than 7% this year, bucking a global slowdown driven in part by the war in the Middle East. SEER expects this will be led by demand for AI tech and strong exports, especially at the start of the year. The think tank also expects inflation of around 2%, limited by government subsidies on oil and frozen electricity prices.
Taiwan's export orders surpassed $91 billion in March, breaking records and growing at the fastest pace in over 16 years. Demand for AI, high-performance computing, and telecom tech drove the 66% year-on-year rise. Taiwan's traditional sectors also recovered, with machinery orders boosted by expanded chip production and the need for automation. March marks the 14th straight month of gains, with the US and China remaining top destinations for Taiwanese products.
Taiwan CPC Corporation says gas and diesel prices will remain unchanged next week, despite pressure from the ongoing U.S. war on Iran. This marks the third consecutive week that the state-run company has maintained its domestic fuel prices at the same level. Global oil prices have continued to fluctuate since the start of the conflict in late February. CPC Corporation says it has absorbed around $360 million in costs since that time. The U.S. and Iran agreed to reopen the Strait of Hormuz in early April following a temporary ceasefire, but Iran has closed the passage once again.
First off, export orders in March came in at $91.12 billion. The first time Taiwan has ever broken the $90 billion mark in a single month. That's a year-on-year increase of 65.9%. and the 14th consecutive month of annual growth. Orders for information and communications technology products, the AI hardware layer, surged 120.9% year-on-year. The Ministry of Economic Affairs say that it beat expectations, which I think is an understatement. Industrial production told the same story. The overall index rose 28.68% from a year ago, hitting a new record as well. The semiconductor sub-index came in at 170.79, also a record, and the 27th consecutive month of year-on-year gains. On the labor market side, unemployment ticked up just slightly, 3.34% in March, but that's still the lowest March reading since 2001. The uptick is probably seasonal, driven by post-Lunar New Year job switching. The Directorate General of Budget Accounting and Statistics expects to fall again in April. So here's the thing that should seem strange but doesn't anymore. The Middle East has been at war for 2 months. Oil is above $100 a barrel. Petrochemical supply chains are disrupted. Consumer confidence in Taiwan just posted one of its sharpest single-month drop in recent memory. The Cathay Financial Optimism Index swung from plus 18.2 in March to minus 32.2 in April. So that's 50-point collapse in 30 days. And yet, Taiwan's factories are running faster than they ever have. Export orders just hit an all-time high. Semiconductor industry has now posted 27 straight months of year-on-year growth. Both of those things are happening at the same time, in the same country, in the same month. So the standard reading of this is Taiwan is resilient. And that's true, but I think the more interesting question is, resilient how exactly? What's the mechanism? Because resilience is not magic. It's a specific set of structural choices that protect you from specific kinds of shocks. And every immune system has something that it can't fight, right? So where is the oversight? Well, the mechanism behind Taiwan's immunity has a name. It's called pricing power. In an inflationary environment, and we are definitely living in one right now, whether we call it that or not, the companies that thrive are the ones that can raise their prices faster than their costs go up. The ones that can't do it, they get squeezed. So think about what's happening in the AI compute layer right now. Anthropic, one of the leading AI model companies, had multiple service outages in recent weeks. Not because something broke, but demand is growing faster than capacity can keep up. And Anthropic's response has been to raise enterprise subscription prices. Alibaba Cloud raised its compute prices 4 times in 4 days. CoreWeave, a major cloud infrastructure provider, is not just raising prices, it's demanding that consumers sign long-term contracts at those elevated rates before it will guarantee capacity. These companies have extraordinary pricing power. When your product is something people genuinely cannot function without, you can charge more for it, and when your costs go up, you just pass them on. Taiwan's semiconductor and AI server supply chain sit right in the middle of this. TSMC's high performance and computing segment, the AI chip segment, now accounts for 67% of its total revenue, up from 60% just a quarter ago. ASML, the Dutch equipment maker that sits at the very top of the chip production chain, raised its revenue outlook for the second time this year. Its CEO said its customers have more orders than they know how to process. So this is what Taiwan's immune system is built on. And for the products at the top of the stack, it works. The war is happening, yes. The oil is expensive, yeah. The supply chains are disrupted. And the AI hardware orders, they keep coming because the customers on the other end of those orders don't have a choice. You can't build a data center without Taiwanese chips, so you pay whatever it costs. Usually you can pass that cost onto your subscribers anyway. But here's the thing about pricing power. Not everyone has it. Taiwan's government this week announced that the plastic bag supply has stabilized. Now I want you to sit with that sentence for a moment, because how ludicrous is it that plastic bag prices have surged? It's not a sentence you expect to be reading in the same week as an all-time export records. Here's what happens. The Middle East war disrupted naphtha supply, and naphtha is a petroleum derivative, and it's what you make ethylene from, and ethylene is what you make polyethylene from, and polyethylene is what you make plastic bags from. The chain goes oil disruption, petrochemical shortage, plastic bag shortage, government emergency intervention. State-run CPC provided Formosa Petrochemical with 5,000 metric tons of raw material. Formosa contracted 10 manufacturers. The government produced enough polyethylene to make 1.25 billion bags. Problem solved for now. And it wasn't just bags. CPC have been absorbing 11.42 billion NT dollars, roughly 363 million US dollars, in increased energy costs since the war began, to keep household fuel prices stable through May. Electricity prices pretty much remain unchanged. Gas prices, definitely unchanged. The government is paying the difference out of its own pocket. And that's what it looks like when you don't have pricing power. You have to absorb the cost. You hope the situation resolves before the buffer runs out. And this obviously isn't unique to Taiwan. It's happening everywhere. Chemical materials, the petrochemical sector, was the only sub-index in Taiwan's industrial production data that actually declined in March, down 3.88% year on year. If you're making AI servers, the war is just white noise. If you're making the raw input that go into everything else, the war is your entire cost structure. I want to tell you about Japanese retirees for a moment because I think they're the most useful data point in this whole story, and nobody is talking about them in the context of Taiwan. Japanese people over 70 are going bankrupt at record rates, and the story of how that happened is worth understanding carefully. These are not people who made bad decisions. These are people who did everything right. They saved cash their entire working lives. They survived oil shocks, asset bubbles, financial crises, every external shock the 20th century threw at them, and they were fine because for 30 years, Japan was in deflation. Cash held its value, savings protected you, and the immune system worked. And then inflation arrived, and it turned out that the immune system that they had built, the one that worked against every external pathogen that they had ever encountered, had no response to the one that came from inside. 40-year-olds in Japan with less than 1 million yen in saving, that's roughly $6,500 have nearly tripled in number over the past 20 years. These are people with no asset buffer. One medical emergency, one car accident, and the financial structure collapse. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous. That's a problem because a lot of people in the US probably only have debt and no savings to speak of. But Asians tend to save a lot, and that's actually a problematic situation to be in if you're in an Asian culture. Now, Taiwan is not Japan. Taiwan has the AI boom. Taiwan has the export orders. Taiwan's asset holders are doing extraordinarily well right now. But arguably, the split is the same. If you hold assets, stocks, property, a portfolio tied to the AI supercycle, inflation is your friend. Your assets appreciate faster than your costs rise. You have pricing power by proxy. If you don't hold assets, if you're a service worker, a restaurant employee, someone whose income is a fixed monthly wage, inflation is not your friend. You feel the oil price directly. You feel the grocery bill directly. You have no buffer and no mechanism to pass the cost on. Taiwan's consumer confidence data is telling you that second group is large. The Cathay Financial poll that we talked about earlier that cratered in April was conducted in the first week of the month, before the second round of US-Iran talk collapsed entirely. The mood has arguably gotten worse since then. Taiwan's government response to this has been essentially absorb and hold, hunker down, absorb the energy cost increases, hold the household prices stable, buy time, and double down on the one relationship that seems to offer structural protection, the one with the US, which we'll talk about right now. This week, the U.S. House Appropriation Committee set aside $500 million in military aid for Taiwan under the Foreign Military Financing Program. At the same time, Taiwan has moved its crude oil sourcing from roughly 30% American to roughly 60% American, essentially doubling its dependence on U.S. energy, U.S. geopolitics, and U.S. everything for the next few months. Taiwan is sending America oil money, America is sending Taiwan military aid, and on the surface that looks like a security relationship functioning as intended. But let's put that next to something else that happened this week. The Gulf states, the countries that built the original version of this relationship with America, are walking away from it. Qatar has banned the use of its U.S. military base to attack Iran. The UAE has threatened to settle oil transactions in Chinese yuan if America doesn't establish a dollar currency swap line. Saudi Aramco settled 42% of its revenue in RMB in March alone. The Abu Dhabi Crown Prince visited Beijing before the first round of US-Iran talks. The Saudi Crown Prince called Xi Jinping before the second round. Now, these are not anti-American countries. The UAE was the first Arab state to normalize relationship with Israel. Bahrain hosted the U.S. Fifth Fleet. Qatar has been one of Washington's most important regional partners for decades. They're not walking away because they dislike America. They're walking away because they ran the experiment and they found out that they're on the wrong side. And at that exact moment, these countries are reassessing. Taiwan is doubling down. I think that's defensible. Taiwan's options are genuinely constrained in ways the Gulf states' options aren't. It doesn't have a land border with China's ally. It can't threaten to run oil transactions through different currency. The AI boom is real, and it depends on a customer base that's overwhelmingly American. And there are real reasons why Taiwan's calculus is different. But the $500 million is also a House committee bill. It still needs the Senate. It still needs the president's signature. And in 2 weeks, the same president is going to sit down with Xi Jinping, at which point Taiwan becomes, as it always does, something to be discussed. The Gulf states thought their indispensability was protection. They had the oil, and they hosted the bases. They priced in dollars, and it turned out that indispensability and protection are not the same thing. America has refused to protect anybody for the time being. And Taiwan has the chips, it has the AI servers, it has the export orders. It is right now arguably more indispensable to American economic interest than any other country on earth, but I argue that's still worth sitting with.
Senior U.S. defense officials are once again calling on Taiwan's lawmakers to pass a $40 billion special defense budget, which, despite rising threats from China, has remained stalled in the legislature for 6 months. Speaking at a U.S. congressional hearing, defense officials urged lawmakers here to find consensus, and soon.
I encourage their legislative body to pass that as soon as possible. A cross-strait invasion would disrupt the global economy and enable China to dominate the Pacific and its key sea lanes to America's detriment. The time is now to strengthen Taiwan's defenses.
The special budget put forward by Taiwan President Lai Ching-te last November has met stiff resistance from opposition parties. Lawmakers in the U.S. are now calling on Taiwan's legislature, its LY, to come together and push it through.
We're actively working to present options to our leadership on different ways to provide security assistance to Taiwan, and will continue to do so.
In written testimony, No said the budget addresses critical gaps in Taiwan's defense and that it came after close collaboration between the Defense Ministry and the U.S. Defense Department. His statement comes after Taiwan's government announced 6 major U.S. arms deals worth over $6.6 billion US dollars. They could see Taiwan purchase advanced missile and rocket artillery systems. But payments on the last round of purchases were delayed by legislative debates over spending. Now, U.S. defense officials are saying that they will do everything in their power to give Taiwan the tools it needs to defend itself and deter China. However, when it comes to domestic politics inside Taiwan, their hands are tied, and it is up to Taiwan to fund its own defenses.
So, in conclusion, Taiwan this week posted the best economic numbers in its modern history, and also, depending on who you are and what you own, one of the most anxious consumer confidence reading in years. That split isn't a contradiction. It's the inflationary world working exactly as designed. Pricing power compounds. The lack of it compounds too. The Japanese retirees who saved cash their whole lives and got destroyed by the first real inflation in 30 years didn't do anything wrong. They just built an immune system for the wrong disease. Taiwan's immune system is extraordinary. The question it can't quite answer yet is what it's immune to and what it isn't. That meeting in Beijing is in 2 weeks, and we'll find out more until then. Thanks for listening to the show. Terribly sorry about my raspy voice. I got sick and lost my voice. Probably will stay that way for the next 2 weeks until the Beijing meeting as well. I'm Joey Cho. Tune in next week to find out more about socioeconomic issues that are faced by Taiwan and their broader impact around the world beyond the reefs of this island nation.